Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you for being here. I am Mark Allen, and today I'm very excited to have Karen Yin as our guest. Karen, I've known from before Conscious Style Guide. I guess we first became aware of each other on Twitter, which is where I meet most of my friends these days. And she was the AP versus Chicago account, and it was a great help for me because I'd always followed AP Style Guide, and I was being asked to edit in Chicago style as a new freelance copy editor, and Karen had this wonderful resource where she compared the two. Um, she's probably better known for the Conscious Style Guide, which is a fantastic website. It was links to articles and discussions about language usage regarding marginalized communities and just being kind in the language we choose to use. It also has original essays on those topics. Um, Karen has described Conscious Style Guide as an online resource for kind, compassionate, and inclusive language. She runs the Editors of Color database, a resource list to help people find and employ more diverse groups of editors. So no excuse when you say I can't find editors of color. They're out there, and here's a database for them. Karen is a Robinson Prize winner. She has a number of other awards and fellowships, and she's now turning her focus to children's literature. Try one more thing. So welcome, Karen.
Thank you. I'm so excited to do this. Welcome,
Yeah,
everybody. This is my office. This is
terrific.
where everything happens.
Do you have the windows covered for
The,
those are
the
like
sun is
blackout?
going to create this glowy strip behind my head, and you
Yeah,
might miss one
of
aura.
course. Um, when we first talked about doing this a few weeks ago, you said you wanted to talk about your new focus on children's books. But probably a better place to start now is what we've seen in the past couple of weeks in terms of, and as it relates to conscious style and inclusivity and diversity, um, there's seems to be a greater awareness of the need for diversity. Maybe that's my limited worldview. What are you seeing?
I see it coming like almost like in waves where you have greater awareness and then people are really interested. And then for one reason or another, people kind of drop the idea or they've tried it and the way they've tried it doesn't work. Because from my perspective, diversity is barely the beginning. And I always say, like high schools are diverse, prisons are diverse. Are they equal? They're not. So it's a great way to begin thinking about how to broaden our perspectives and raise voices that are often muffled. But definitely, we want to go beyond diversity and actually change the structures in place which prevent equality from taking root. So it's a much bigger issue. So if people always try to engage in the immediate things and then it's not working because you haven't changed the foundation, then of course it's going to be frustrating and you're going to
Yeah,
frustrate the people you hire. And so I hope
right.
this takes hold. I hope that especially this focus on Black communities will help people understand that this is a very meaningful time for us. We have another opportunity to create change.
Mhm.
We are dismantling now, and hopefully we will rebuild something better.
Hmm. So, have you had greater interest in the Editors of Color database
Yes,
as a result of this?
I'm so proud of that project. I gotta say, because it's one of those things where, like, before I created it, every few months I would Google editors of color, and I'm like, there's got to be something I can join. There's got to be something I could connect with. Like,
Hmm.
where's this community? Like, I can't believe that this doesn't exist. I mean, nothing came up for it except for a few articles. And you know, I was finally kind of pushed to this point of creating it myself, even though, as you know, I really don't have the time to create a whole new website.
You have a lot of projects. You have a lot of irons in
I
the
have a lot,
fires.
yes. And the way I
So,
procrastinate is I do another project and I procrastinate on this project, go into another project. So there was always a good response to the editors of color database. People always love that. I don't know how many editors and proofreaders and sensitivity readers have actually joined. I don't check that too often, but I've certainly got a lot of signups lately. So somewhere around 150, I would say.
oh, really?
So for sure, now people don't really have an excuse of saying, oh, I can't find this. I can't find an editor of color. Or, not even for editing, but for if you want to interview somebody, or if you want somebody on your panel, or some other source, not just for hiring or for your project. So like this database has all those search things that you can check off. So it narrows it down to somebody in the area you like. So yeah.
Yeah. So and this is a couple of years ago, 3 years ago now.
I don't think it's even been that long. And with everything I do, there's a soft launch and then there's like the real launch. So I want to say maybe 2 years.
Okay. Yeah. And
Yeah.
how long ago was Conscious Style Guide?
That I started in 2015. And I debuted it at the ACES conference. So I consider that kind of like its birthday. So this year is the 5th anniversary. And I was going to do like this thing, like at least change the logo or something, right, to say 5th anniversary. But then, this happened.
Yeah. It's a nice, both these sites are very nice looking. I mean, let me compliment you. They're not just what they do, which is of course the main thing, but they're clean. They're easy to navigate. It's easy to get to the information you want. Cool logos for the different things. Is that your doing? Did you have some?
I pretty much do everything myself. My partner is also a designer and an animator, and she's also my tech person. So like I do have help. I actually have a bigger team behind me. So everything you see, I do have a wonderful advisory council. Like Henry Furman is also on the ACES board, and Christine Ma, and Steve Baname has been a speaker at the ACES conferences many times. And then the latest, last year, I invited Steve Kleinedler. So very good. And also, I don't want to forget this person. Dawn Stahl Purple Penning is the person who does my social media. And I really cannot do it without her. Yeah, she's amazing.
She does a great job then. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I know all those people. That's great. It's all friends. And Steve did a, I don't know if you caught it, but he did a ACES chat last week.
I caught it.
Yeah. And it was really great. It's on this topic of, I mean, it was very timely with the diversity and the need for diversity in editing. So yeah, it was great.
Yeah,
I think
he's so good at putting it down. So I've watched him do it in person, and I really love his description of the difference between inclusive language and politically correct language.
Right.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
In fact, let me get him on this thing.
We should have him on as a guest because he's actually we talked about. I haven't invited him yet, but we've talked about him. He's not too far from me. He's in like northern Kentucky, Cincinnati area where my son is. So yeah. So we're practically neighbors. So I've got no reason not to get him on the show. So what was the motivation for Conscious Style Guide?
So I thought of the idea the same year I launched AP versus Chicago, which is 2011. And you can tell because if you go to the Conscious Styles Twitter account, you'll notice that the year it started was 2011. However, I didn't launch until 2015. And that's because as soon as I thought of it, the marketing person in me said, I got to get these social media accounts. So I already, I already um, took over Conscious Styles. I want to make sure that I had these names when I was ready to launch. So
Hmm.
actually, there was a major gap between when I thought of it versus when it actually happened. And it's because I was still working in advertising at the time. And thank goodness I left for many reasons. But I don't think Conscious Style Guide would exist if I did not leave, because I just did not have the space or the time or the mental capacity to launch something that was, first of all, so close to my heart. And
Hmm.
also I knew I would run it like a business and I would be constantly maintaining it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then I actually get the question a lot about, like how it started. And a big reason is that as somebody who has been an editor, professional editor for decades, I've been keeping tabs of all these community style guides. They're often written by media organizations, like journalist organizations, or
Hmm.
sometimes they're written by, like, let's say, GLAAD. And I thought these are gold,
Yeah.
but does anybody know about them? And I thought, you know what? I'm just gonna create a website and I'm gonna put everything together. So you don't need to be like me and figure out what are the keywords to find this. Like, where was it again? And have these either sticky notes or have these lists on your desk or a hard drive. I'm just going to put everything together. And then because I've been editing for so long, and because I'm part of many of these marginalized communities, I am the perfect person to curate this because I can tell what's
Hmm.
bullshit, to be honest.
Hmm.
So like, because there's so much stuff out there, and I'm like, well, no, that's outdated. That's already been debunked. So like, this is what I do. I do this every day with every article that I read. I think, is this appropriate to share on Conscious Style Guide Media, which actually later on goes to the newsletter, which
Hmm.
also works to the website. So like all this, like I've been living this for a long time. It's
Is it?
draining.
Well, it must be overwhelming at times because I mean, I've looked. I looked through the newsletter. It's monthly, right? Newsletter.
It's monthly. Yes, I used to take a break, but then like somebody was like, "Where's the newsletter?" And I was like, "Oh no,
Yeah.
I'm not reading it."
Yeah. But there, I mean, there are, I don't know, 20 stories. And there are a whole bunch of links in every newsletter. There's a lot. I mean, there's a lot to say about conscious language in the course of a month, generally in the
There
media, which
is.
is great. Yeah.
There is, and I'm slightly remorseful for saying that it's draining because it also gives me a lot of life. But the
Sure.
draining part is when I read article after article about slurs and things like that. And then it's like, that is for sure draining.
Mm.
So that's why, like, I also have a lot of fun things that I look for, like empowering language, and that kind of lifts me back up again. So it's like, because I go back from topic to topic, um, it's fun. It's still really, really intriguing for me. And I still have deep curiosity about all these communities and all these different ways of doing things with language.
Hmm. I find that it's not a website about oppression as much as that exists.
Right.
It's a website about empowerment and
Yes. I'm
yeah,
glad you noticed that.
yeah.
And I'm also very clear that it's not about it's not about oppression, but it might be about oppressive language. So everything goes back to language. So every time I have a little excerpt from the article, I try to drive home that point. And if this intrigues you, please read the article. Go there.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
And
But
I
yeah,
and I did. Sorry, go on.
ultimately, I try to fill you with the sense of you're in control. You can do something about it. You can tap into your own power. Like, you don't need to wait. And I also emphasize critical thinking because a lot of people want to read a style guide or refer to a style guide that tells them exactly what to say. And it might have a little bit of usage discussion. And I love those style guides too. And I link to a lot of them on the site. But I also want people to at some point step back and say, I need to figure out what's happening with this community or with this area on my own, so that when it comes time for me to choose how to frame it, what narrative, what stereotypes to avoid, then I myself, I'm more informed, so that when I see a style guide, even mine, that says something, you can say, oh, but based on my knowledge for this is actually more appropriate for my audience and my
Mm-hmm.
tone and for my purposes. Because like, I think you were one of the people in the beginning who was like, it says style guide, but where's your actual like glossary thing? And I try to make one. I don't remember if I published it or not, but I started to make one. And I realized I don't think that's what Conscious Style Guide does. Because what Conscious Style Guide does is it keeps evolving depending on what's happening with society. So not only will this guide that I'm making, it's going to be almost like immediately outdated, but I don't know who your audience is. So the example I used to use is like, for an LGBTQ publication, go ahead and say queer. Like that's what we say, it's fine. But for like the New York Times, you might not want to say queer. So recently, like maybe within a year, maybe 2 years, the New York Times had queer in the headline. So that's not a good example anymore. But you understand what I'm saying. Like you would adapt language for what your purposes are. And I have no way of knowing what you're going to use it for. So that's why you need to be able to discuss this with your newsroom or with your company or with yourself or whatever, your mentor group, and figure it out.
Hmm.
And what might help is if instead of trying to make your own lists of words, come up with an overarching guideline so that you don't have to keep evaluating each word as it comes up. For example, like I'm in the habit of whenever I talk about a community, I will usually make it plural. And this serves to remind myself and whoever's reading this that there's no such thing as the Black community or the queer community. It's always communities.
Hmm.
There are some exceptions to this, but only if, like, for very specific purposes. You are talking about, like, let's say you're at a company and they say, oh, for this community, that's totally fine, singular.
Right. Interesting. And when has there been more? We talked about this a little bit. Has there been more interest recently? And again, this is maybe my perception, maybe my awareness. Has been more interest recently about conscious language by people who write things?
I want to say yes, and so this is why. When I first started it, I just came up with the phrase conscious language because mindful was too specific, respectful was, everything was too specific, inclusive was too specific. And I thought, I need something that captures everything. So I looked it up, and there's somebody in some other field who uses it, but they use it for like it has a different meaning. So I thought, yeah, I'm gonna go for it. And when I first launched the website, I had like this whole line. It said conscious language equals respectful language, inclusive language, empowering language, and it goes on and on, like 7 different things.
Yeah.
And after a few years, I started to realize I don't need to explain it anymore. People are using it on their own. Speakers at ACES are putting it in their session titles. People are writing, in the editing world, they're writing about it and they're calling it conscious language. They're saying conscious editing, which is the title of one of my speeches. So like, I would like to think that I had a lot to do with that.
It sounds like you did. I mean, I don't know if you like got the baseline. I suppose we could do the Google trend thing, right? And see how the term has increased. But that's really cool that was your sort of coinage. I mean, I'm sure that the concept existed before, but you've put that front and center in terms of awareness now. So
Yeah, and what was really powerful was last year, I've never exhibited before, but I was at the AWP. Do you know what the AWP is?
yeah, I was there
Okay, so
this year.
It's like, I think it's the largest North American literary conference
It's
where
not the
like,
one I went to. It was just before just as the coronavirus was hitting. A lot of people canceled. It was in San Antonio. It was great. Yeah.
yeah. So I set up a booth and I did it with my colleague, Naomi Eagleson, who is also the Artful Editor. I highly recommend her
Oh
service.
yeah.
It's an agency for editors. Um, we shared a table together, and I kept changing my pitch, the pitch, like when people would walk by, I would be standing there with a postcard, and I realized that I didn't have to explain what conscious language was. I would say, would you like a free resource for conscious language? And they immediately, I could see the recognition in their eyes, and I was just filled with so much love, even if like, yeah, I'm assuming that like it's from all my efforts, but I
Go ahead. Yeah.
warm and fuzzy from that whole experience. And it was
Yeah.
just a really wonderful place for me to be.
Yeah. Well, I'm feeling warm and fuzzy as an observer and looking at the success. And when we first talked about it years ago and you told me about it, it was just so obvious that it was something that'd be great and needed. And as you said, I thought when you first sort of presented it, I thought, well, where do I click on a term to get sort of, the answer or answers to, but how it's set up is much more logical because conscious language involves consciousness, and we ought to be thinking about the terms, not just simply applying them because AP style book says do it this way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I want to emphasize that for people who just want a quick list, I have links to all of those too. So I'm
Mhm.
not leaving you stranded. So please, one of my goals with Conscious Style Guide is always to shine the spotlight on people who have already been doing the work. So these organizations and these communities have already been leaders and creating these wonderful resources. So I'm just trying to say, look at what they've done.
Yeah, yeah. So,
Go
so
visit the site.
some of them must be in conflict with each other, I would think.
Absolutely.
How do you
Absolutely.
deal with that?
That's why you need to figure out what your goals are.
Mhm.
And I don't even want to give examples because I think it's going to confuse people. But
Yeah.
yeah, sometimes it'll be so contradictory that it'll be very confusing for you. Like especially with LGBTQ terminology. Like
Yeah.
unless you're part of that community, like I am, it might be really, really super confusing for you. For example, what bisexual means. You might think it means, oh, attraction to men and women, whereas that is not the reigning definition for bi plus activists. So in another guide in GLAD, you'll see a different definition,
Mhm.
which is attraction to one or more genders. So
I
that
see.
leaves it
Yeah.
wider,
Right.
so yeah, because the bi plus communities, we have always been very, very supportive of agender people, transgender people. So to focus on men and women really does us a disservice.
Mhm. Is our understanding changing? I mean, this is the thing with the terminology. If I were to look up what GLAD had 5 years ago, would it be the same, or does that evolve
I might have
also?
printed it out. I think I'm still keeping all of the versions.
Oh, really?
It absolutely changes. It changes for many reasons. I mean, um, especially with LGBTQ terminology, it changes so fast that for Conscious Style Guide to be of service to more people, I don't focus on all the activity on the edges. I kind of wait for it to settle. So I'm not a first adopter of any kind because I don't think that'll really help a lot of people. So I always focus
Mhm.
on keeping it kind of like a bridge from the mainstream to the next one or two steps. I think
Mhm.
that's what people like about it.
Mhm. Yeah. So you told us before the show started that you had was an AP versus Chicago mug, the kind you just lifted to give away to one lucky person. And we haven't figured out how to give it away, but I think probably the first person to ask a question in the chat should get a mug. But it has to be a decent question that Heather feels is worthy of sharing in the group. So we'll wait for that. So we talked about Conscious Style Guide, Editors of Color database.
Oh, by the way, I just want to
yeah.
say, I want to say that for the Editors of Color database, I often don't hear if people make connections, but recently I've heard of people hiring so many people, and that also really warms my heart. It's like, yes, thanks. I mean, you didn't tell me, but I'm so glad that it's finally making its way to me, like it's serving its purpose.
Right. Is there a particular group that is a particular industry that is interested in that database in particular?
Yes, I'm from book publishers that they've been hiring. Yeah. So, and I don't know if a lot of people are using sensitivity readers, and there's also a lot of controversy about that, about, you know, which we don't have to get into, but like, there are editors who have checked that box on their profiles. So that's a good place for you to go also.
So, but well, you see, you don't want to get into it. What is the controversy is over whether your sensitivity readers
perked your attention, huh? Or caught your attention?
Well, yeah, it did. And what is the controversy briefly in terms of sensitivity readers?
Let me try to be concise. There's debate whether, first of all, many people of color do want non-people of color to write about people with a different cultural or ethnic background. We just want you to do it well. We want you to do the research. We want you to look at the stereotypes and the tropes and the cliches, so you don't do that also. But for some people who need more help, like including me, I've used sensitivity readers and beta readers. So if you want more help, you can ask somebody who has the lived experience and the deeper and broader knowledge of that culture or of that activity. Because, we're also talking about, religion. Like it's not necessarily color, like whatever they check in that thing. It could be like a queer, they want a queer perspective, or they're writing about a trans person. So the problem comes when the act of trying to make your language and your stories more representative, and you might be exploiting the person who probably should have more support as the, we should support as the writer of this piece. So you are tapping into their lives, like the sum of their everything. And you're paying them, I don't know, like maybe the going rate is $250 a book. I hope it's higher. But you're kind of like using them for this purpose, and then off you go. And you still might not have understood anything about this culture that you're writing about. So that can be intensely frustrating.
And there's been, I've seen the controversy over using an Asian person to speak for all Asians, in effect, or people who maybe are Black and don't have the lived experience of what's being written about in the book. And so there's been some eruptions along those lines on Twitter. And
and I can't remember the name of the resource, but I think the one I always point people to is Writing About Color. It's on Conscious Style Guide. It is, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be rude by looking away, but I believe it's actually under creative writing. So I have a whole section about creative writing, because writing fiction is different from writing for newspapers or, So writing with color. So, and also TV tropes. Check out the tropes. And I am not telling people to avoid tropes or even stereotypes. I want you to have, if you want to artfully use it as a starting point, and then you start to expand it and complicate it and humanize it, that's awesome. So I rarely will say, oh, don't ever do this. I will say, don't ever use the N-word. But everything else, like there's a way to build a bridge to it, to infuse it with more meaning or complexity. Because the problem with stereotypes is it's just like a screenshot. It's like, so what? And where'd you get this from? Somebody else already, you know, you have generations of people using the same screenshot. We're tired of this image. Like, do something more interesting. Like, talk to one of us.
Yeah.
You know, like it's all about, you know, just exploding biases. And also, as a writer, be creative, because that's really not creative at all.
Right. I want to ask you about allyship, but let's see if because I tend to like ask and I ignore the fact that we have questions from the group, and what we do is we like let people unmute and ask their questions. And so, Heather, do we have a winning question, a mug-worthy question yet? Feel free to say no.
We've got a lot of good questions. I think the one from Wendy Allen is very good. Wendy, would you want to unmute and ask your question?
In there. Hi.
Oh, sure.
Hello. I am wondering if you could expand on kind of that difference between PC language versus conscious language. You brought it up a little earlier and it was intriguing.
You know, I've always said that I don't understand what politically correct language is. And I feel like at this point, I should be able to give people a better response. But the truth is, it really flummoxes me because I don't understand the intent for using that seems to me to be to shut the other person down. Like, oh, you're being politically correct. End of conversation. So that is the opposite of what conscious language does, which is we're trying to get more people involved. We're trying to ask people to really think about what you're talking about, how you're talking about them, why you're talking about them. So it's I want to say that it brings more people into the conversation as opposed to saying, oh, that's just political correctness. Ask Steve Bename; he's going to give you a better answer. But it's very confusing to me.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Did that help?
Let me ask you about what made me think of when we talked about the controversy over sensitivity readers, and there have been a lot of difficulties in organizations that try to do something and then do it poorly, and there's been eruptions over that, and it's sad when you see people who are at least trying then to be sort of make matters worse and be turned on. And there seems to be this fighting between allies who, because one's not strong enough of an ally. Is that an observation that you've seen, and what can we? Is this a problem because there are people who I think who want to be allies who maybe are afraid to speak out because they're not sure that they can relate to the experience of somebody who they want to support.
So let me use an example that's a little bit removed because emotions are so high and so everything's so tense around what's been happening. So whenever, let's say a natural disaster happens, people want to donate. So people donate in many ways. Some people will send supplies over, some people will tweet a lot, some people will donate money. I've read enough to understand that they don't want you to send anything over. That just frustrates the entire process. They have all these things, they can't even get to the people who need them. It ties up their resources. So the best way is to give money. So if you were to apply this type of just very like critical thinking about how you give, it's very similar for wanting to be an ally and wanting to support Black Lives Matter. You need to do your research because, first of all, like the donation situation, you have a lot of people saying, oh, you know, go to this protest, oh, go to, you know, give money here, or, but they may not be legit at all. So you need to watch out for that. So I know the deeper question that you're asking is something about like, oh, it's so sad that people who have the best of intentions are being criticized for the way they've reacted. And I see it from, you know, several points of view. In most things, I try to always have, you know, the improv motto, which is yes and. So I try to always say, well, so thoughts and prayers, yes, and you can do this. So you're tweeting and you're retweeting, yes, and you can also do this. So I want to keep building, but that's me. And I might be an unpopular opinion in some circles, but please keep in mind that you're dealing with communities that have been deeply traumatized, deeply. It's like, you know, like if I just press along my skin, what's gonna hurt the most is the bruise. So I need to be careful of this area. So we need to just be really aware that the collective trauma is very real. And if you're saying, oh, I'm gonna do this one thing and I've done my part, if anybody in one of the communities gets mad at you, please listen. Or please be open to receiving it. So I'm trying to avoid ableist language. Just be open to, you know, just pay attention to what's happening. And if it's all too confusing, and because even for me to keep up with all the amazing tweets from these communities, from people's perspectives, from witnesses, from protesters, it's really difficult. So find a few that you can follow and just refer to those. And that's also my recommendation for style guides. So let's say you have 5 style guides that all talk about queer terminology. Find the one that you like the most. Stick with it. You're good.
Mm-hmm.
So like, try not to be you know, don't make it harder on yourself, especially if this is new to you. I always tell people the newsletter is for, like, if you just skim the headlines and the paragraphs, it's kind of like gently dipping you into like this understanding, like what's happening. And then hopefully it will spur you to go deeper somewhere. So just find one style guide, find 1 or 2, or I don't know, however many people you can handle, and then build from there. Because activists and any community, they have their own language. So you have to kind of get used to the language as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and none of this is easy. And I have never said it's easy. In fact, in the early days, I wrote this very, very badly written piece about how we need to grieve over these words and language that we break up with. And my example was with not saying Chinese New Year. Instead, I switched to Lunar New Year. But Lunar New Year has no emotional resonance for me at all. Chinese New Year does. So like I had this grief where it's like, well, to be more inclusive, you know, I want to start becoming accustomed to saying this. And now I'm totally used to it. So allow yourself the time to transition, to become accustomed to what's happening. And it's gonna change all the time. But that's why I put so much energy into creating my monthly newsletter. I'm trying to help you out.
You know, and it doesn't take too long to get, as you say, to get used to those changing terms. I think there's a lot of resistance, and you still hear people, you know, who frankly sound like broken records when when they're saying he is the universal pronoun. Nobody really believes that. Well, some people really believe that, but it's what has happened is that that's become uh, a very strange thing to hear. Whereas you had people 10 years ago maybe still vociferously defending it, and that's just, that's probably an extreme example, but there are a lot of terms that seem odd to us and seem uncomfortable for us to use, but it doesn't take long for language to sort of accept them.
Right. I mean, language moves so fast.
Mhm.
It moves so fast.
So let's get into let's talk about what you told me about children's books, because I don't want to not talk about what your focus is now. I don't know how you have time for a new focus, because you must be reading a lot these days about conscious language. That's something that everybody is writing about now. So it should be an interesting newsletter. But what's going on with children's books?
So, I think it's really obvious whenever my attention turns to something else, because it is always reflected on Conscious Style Guide. It is, because when my attention turned to writing children's books, at the same time, I think I launched Conscious Style Guide on Instagram, and I used that feed purely to dissect language in Kidlit. And it's because in fiction, I mean, I know not all Kidlit is fiction, but in creative writing, you can do a lot more with language. For example, I think one of the examples I posted about was, you can have people say words that are unkind, like slut. I don't know. I feel that's kind of a more neutral. I could use another word, okay, Mark. So I chose slut.
Okay.
So you can drop the word slut in a book, but if you don't do anything about it, then that's a problem. But there are ways to support that use. It must have an arc. You need to, like, I would never just drop it like a bomb. It has to go somewhere. It has to be meaningful. And you can make it meaningful in many ways. Either you can have the whole book arc around it, which is a lot, or like immediately you can have a character respond. Humor works really well. Like, especially if someone calls you a slut, turn around, say something funny, and at the same time you're making it clear this is not acceptable. So you've taught the reader, the children who are reading this, I'm sorry, I want to make sure people know that in Kidlit, that also includes YA, young adult. So like, I'm sure like a picture book is unlikely to have slut in it, but I have read the N-word in picture books.
You've read the N-word in picture books?
Yes.
In the African-American community, or where?
It was,
how?
both were picture book biographies. And they talked about how they grew up, what they dealt with, where they came from, the odds that they encountered. So in that context.
Interesting, yeah.
Yes, it is interesting. There's so much happening in Kidlit. There's so much happening. It's on the precipice of many things. A lot of people think that you cannot write about anything negative or traumatic in picture books or middle grade, but you absolutely can. So it's all a matter of doing it very artfully, being very skillful with how you present it, and not using like sensitive language to provoke and then you run away. I want to write an article about this, but I'm so busy as a children's book writer that I don't have time to write this article. But anyway, like, all these things are running through my mind because, I'm well on my way to having read like hundreds of picture books this year. they count, okay? Whoever's laughing at me, I know you're laughing. But
Oh,
yeah, so reading picture books counts. And so I see all these beautiful ways that people use to introduce difficult topics. You know, and just be that book for the child who's going through that thing and they don't know what to do.
so what specifically, can you tell us what you're working on?
Well, there's so much happening. It's so exciting. I think all I can say is that you should be able to see something happen in a year.
Oh, terrific.
I
Yeah. Okay. Well, do a book tour. Hopefully, we're done with the
I was
virus by
positive
then.
before.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
I
What did you say?
oh, I don't remember. I was trying to hear what you said, and I think we had a connection problem there for a second. I said do a book tour. Hopefully, we'll have the virus in the past. I doubt it, but in a year, but we'll see. And yeah, we do have I think a couple more questions, probably. I don't know. I think we. Was that the only mug? Wendy Allen gets the mug, I believe.
I can do 2 mugs, Mark.
You can do 2 mugs. You're a very giving
I
person.
can do 2 mugs.
All right.
These are
Heather,
awesome, by the way. It's made of
we,
stoneware.
oh, really? We
Yes.
haven't even talked about AP versus Chicago, really.
Oh, whatever. That was an outlet for humor because I need humor in my life. And I was working literally 80 hours a week in advertising. And I was like, I need to have some joy. So like
mm,
the nerd I am, it was writing about style.
uh,
Yeah.
and that is, let me just say that can be painful because I have presented on style guide differences, and I did a PowerPoint, and I thought I'm just going to do some charts, and I'm going to look at how AP does that, APA, MLA, Chicago. None of them like focus on the same things. There's always like a dozen footnotes or columns that this person carries, cut covers, and this person doesn't. So it's not a simple undertaking, AP versus Chicago.
It wasn't. I tried to go in a logical order, and then at some point I stopped. And then, I was a columnist for copy editing newsletter.
Yeah.
That was held by the lovely Erin Brenner, the best editor ever, I want to say. So I was able to take all of my articles and publish them on my websites. So even though I stopped blogging about AP and Chicago style, I still posted most of the relevant ones on there, and I did not promote it because I'm just so stretched for time. So I never promoted it. But if you want to read those, if you go to AP vs. Chicago, one column says funny posts, and then the other says fun-free posts. So those are the fun-free posts.
Okay. Definitely gonna do that. We'll get a link up there too in the chat.
Okay.
So who gets the second mug?
So Melissa Hellman had a question. She doesn't have a mic, so I will read it off. She asks, what tack would you recommend taking with older literature that uses outdated language but is still read today? And she provided the example of things like the Little House books.
I love this question. It's been many years since I've read Little House on the Prairie, but I think you're probably referring to the treatment of Native peoples. This is what I suggest. I would not let a child cross a street without teaching them how to look both ways, teaching them to go in the lines of the intersection without holding their hands, without just really being a guide for them the whole way. If for some reason you cannot find a book that does not disparage a community, and for some reason you're stuck with this, I recommend the same thing. be there to eliminate, point out the racism, point out the discrimination, make it, we must name it and talk about it and give it some air. Like I would read about how it was a Dr. Seuss, like somewhere there's a big exhibit and they decided to take it down because, you know, I guess they recently found out that in his past he had anti-Chinese or anti-Asian sentiments. And I, as an East Asian American, thought, well, I don't remember what building this was in, but let's say it was more like a museum. I would have preferred they actually devote several plaques saying, look at this racist caricature, and talking about it and showing people. So this is what we're doing with Black Lives Matter now. Look at what's happening. Are we trying to hide it? Why are we trying to hide it? This is what's happening. This has always been happening. We need to pay attention to this. So I'm more from that school of thought, where use it to learn, and don't just give them a book and let them just have them read it on their own and just do a book report. No, we need to talk about it.
Great question, great answer. We have at least one more, I think.
Yes, we do. Beatrice had a question. Beatrice, if you want to unmute and ask.
Hi, thank you. I have so enjoyed this conversation. I was hoping to maybe get some guidance about what to do when we're editing and our writers resist using conscious language, no matter how diplomatically we present it to them in our edits and queries. So if they are resistant, do we have a duty to push and encourage inclusive language? And if it helps, my own background is that I do copy editing for scholars, especially in history, who are publishing with academic presses. So I know that audience and the type of writing, you may have different advice.
Okay, in general, I would say often it matters how you phrase the query. So let's say you phrased it beautifully. You've already said something like, I noticed that you used this word here so that our readers understand, or so that you're inclusive of more readers, or, you know, whatever your reason is. You know, what about this phrase or this, or, you know, deleting it altogether. So let's say you've already phrased it beautifully and they are still resistant. My general rule is I will only bring it up one more time, because I am not in the business of conversion. My job is not to change people's minds. My time is finite. And if I see that, you know, I literally have only so much time to spare. I am not going to spend my precious time and energy trying to convince somebody who is resistant and perhaps hostile. I'm going to put my time and energy into building here where it's welcome and where I can do greater good with, you know, my resources. My little secondary response is, if you're working for a company and you're editing corporate materials, or if you're working for an academic institution, you know, they have guidelines also. So if you can try to change those style guides or those, you know, policies, whatever it is, so that you can go back and say, hey, you know, I've changed this. We're changing this because this is our decision. This is how we're doing it. Did that answer your question?
Yes, that was very helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
I think you're
Thank
right
you.
that sometimes we might waste time that could be devoted elsewhere. So thank you.
Exactly.
Yeah, thank you, Beatrice. We're running short on time, Karen. I'm impressed that the mugs are high quality. I haven't seen a mug that, I know the t-shirt is high quality. It's so comfortable and so well made. And I didn't wear mine for the, you know, for this, but I appreciate the quality. So
don't know if you can see it, but this is the Conscious Style Guide one that says make peace with words.
Mm-hmm. And I want to ask you about that. What does that mean to you, make peace with words?
I started, how much time do I have? I'm going to look at the clock.
All the time in the world. Nobody's going anywhere.
I started this really unsuccessful campaign, hashtag make peace with words, because I was so aware of how affected I was by certain language, like especially language that harmed me or harmed my communities. And sometimes it kind of immobilizes you, and you're just kind of in this cycle of rage and like isolation and concern for your well-being, your livelihood, like because of the language used. So many years ago, I started to kind of train myself to like let go of this, because I don't like people having power over me. I don't like words having power over me. So that's what this is about. This is about not ignoring these things happening as much as emotionally freeing myself so that I can take action, so that I'm stronger, so I can change the world instead of like being caught. This is what harmful language is often intended to do. It's intended to make you feel really awful about yourself and to take away your self-esteem. So I'm fighting back against that. So, and the other meaning of make peace with words, well, the two meanings is, not only do I wish that you are at peace with words, because words are really not the enemy. It's the tone, it's the feeling, it's the prejudice behind the words. I can say I love you in such a horrible way, I'm gonna skunk it for you. You're never gonna hear I love you in a nice way. So it's not the words, it's everything else. It's the context, it's everything else. So the second meaning is use words to make peace. Use words to make peace.
All right. Wonderful. Well, it's been wonderful to see you
It was
this
so
way.
wonderful to see you.
Yeah. And maybe we'll see each other in Atlanta, or maybe when you do a book tour, you'll come to Bexley and include a little bit of Ohio. I know it's a long way from Los Angeles, but love to have you over here. So thank you very much. Thank you all for being here. And we've got
Thank you so much for inviting me, and I thank you everybody
yeah.
for coming to this little party.
We're gonna play a little bit more music on our way out. So, and I can never do it smoothly, but there we go. Sharing screen, and here we go. Thanks very much, everybody. Thank you, Karen.